Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan untuk kita semua. Hello everyone, good evening from Indonesia. Welcome back to summer course Lex Proficia 2021. My name is Faraziana Tisha Putri and you can call me Tisha as the master of ceremony for today's sessions. First of all, let us give our praise to our God, to his blessing and mercy we can still gather virtually in this lovely afternoon. So let us start today's sessions with pray. So the sessions will run well without any obstacle at all. Let the pray begin. Amen. Thank you. Proceed to the next agenda. Now we come into the most awaited section, that is the class sessions. And today we have an interesting topic. We will talking about international economic law with our special speaker, the one and only Associate Professor Dr. Hanif Ahmad, the International Economic Lecturer at University Kebangsaan Malaysia. That will be guided by our moderator, Mr. Handi Rizky Prananda, SHMH. But before that, I would like to introduce our moderator based on his CV. Okay, we have Mr. Handi Rizky Prananda, SHMH. He is a lecturer in Civil Law Department, Faculty of Law, Universitas Diponegoro. He obtained his bachelor and master degree in Faculty of Law, Diponegoro University. He has taught all subjects in subchapter private law. His research interests are in the area of civil law, business law, and digital economic law. He has published several articles in national and a few international journal or proceeding. And he also assigned as staff on media and public relations task force in Faculty of Law, Universitas Diponegoro. All right, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Handi Rizky Prananda, SHMH.
Okay, can you hear me, Tisha?
Yes, crystal clear, Pak Handi.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Miss Atisha, for warm welcoming. Okay, good afternoon for our honorable distinguished lecturer, Dr. Hanif Ahmad from Faculty of Law, the National University of Malaysia. How are you, Doctor?
I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Okay. And also good afternoon for the fellow participant of Lex Proficia 2021 who are joining on this Zoom meeting room or watching this session through live streaming on YouTube. My name is Rahandi Rizky Prananda. I'm lecturer from the Civil Law Department in Faculty of Law, Diponegoro University. It is my honorable and pleasure to be moderator on this afternoon. And of course, I have a duty to leading this discussion on the virtual law class, First of all, I would like to welcome you in this virtual law class about the introduction of the international economic law. The scope of discussion for this afternoon are divided into three parts. The first is regarding the constitution of WTO. The second, we will discuss about component of the international economic law. And the third part is discuss about analysis of international economic law based on comparative study between Malaysia and Indonesia. Before we start the main agenda, I would like to introduce our honorable speaker by read his curriculum vitae. Dr. Hanif Ahmad is an academic staff and associate professor from the Faculty of Law, the National University of Malaysia. He obtained his LLB degree from the International Islamic University. Then he completed his LLM degree from the National University of Malaysia. He finished his doctoral title from University of Essex, United Kingdom. His teaching area including public international law, competition law, law for SME, and international international economic law. Dr. Hanif Ahmad, besides his activity as a legal scholar, he is a non-practicing member of the Malaysian Bar and actively involved as legal consultant for the public and private sectors on the practical application of Malaysia and international law within his area of expertise. That's all our international speaker profile for today. Without further ado and interruption, now I'm giving the time for Dr. Hanif Ahmad to share his presentation, more and less 45 minutes. For Dr. Hanif Ahmad, the time is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Rahandi. I would like to thank, I'm so sorry I have to use my earphone because I'm not that young. Okay, thank you very much also to Tisha. Thank you very much to Undip Law School, University of Diponegoro University Law School for giving me the opportunity again to be with you, to be with this terrific program, the program that I think should also be emulated or should also be conducted in universities and also law schools across Malaysia. Okay, let me share with all of you my screen. Okay, I have to tell you that I am also not very good in, oh my God, I am now looking for my, okay.
Do you need an assistance from our staff?
No, what I will do, I will just exit full screen for a while. All right, yeah, I think that's the reason why I can't open it. Okay, never mind. Now I have got at it already. Okay, let me try again. Oh, I don't know why. Oops, window MOA. All right. What I will do, I will close every of my other files because I think there are too many files on my computer. Okay, I think if you can help me to share.
Okay, I will ask the operator to.
Okay, one moment. Let me try again if I can open, because the thing is I cannot locate. I don't know why. Oh, okay, now it's there. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
All right. So as introduced by Mr. Rahandi, my presentation will have three components altogether. First, I will discuss with you about the constitution of the World Trading System. By the way, I'm going to, like, of course, practice my Indonesian language. So I will, do some of the points I will explain in Bahasa Indonesia or maybe Bahasa Melayu. So the first component is the constitution of the World Trading System, followed by components of international economic law and a comparative analysis between Malaysia and Indonesia. Right. Basically, I want to re-clarify about the choice of the choice of subtopic. That is the constitution of World Trading System. It is not confined. It's not limited to the World Trade Organization, that is the WTO, but it's just an introduction of the ecosystem with regards to international economic law, because. Okay, now we move to how do we understand the definition of international economic law. So that is what I'm going to explain with regards to the constitution of the World Trading System. Okay, when we look at the word constitution, it is not similar to the constitution of Malaysia, Indonesia. No, it's actually the constitution is the breakup of the system. When we talk about system, it has to be something which has a structure, which has also rules that govern the conduct of the addresses of the system. And when we say world trading, okay, it's not only about international trade that we used to understand. Okay, I will go to that later. All right. Now, what is international economic law? There is no single definition. When I mean no single definition, if you go to the library, I'm not sure if the library of universities in Indonesia are open. Unfortunately, the library in our country is still not open. So it's something, which we really long to go to. There's no single definition means if we go to the library and we find some books on international economic law, the scope, the coverage of the book might not be similar, or there's no standard coverage of the subject in each book written by different authors. This is because the term international economic law itself sometimes can be given quite a narrow interpretation, or it can also be given quite a wide interpretation. Literally speaking, when I say literally speaking, it means we look from the angle of the language. If we break the term international economic law into 3 pieces, if I can use the word pieces, I'm so sorry for those who are an expert in language, English language. First, international. Okay, what do we mean by international? Students of public international law in particular should know about how something can be international. International will be, manifest in the fact that each country or each state, in international law we call state, each state has its territorial boundaries, has its territorial borders. So international economic law must involve something which go across the border. Second, economic. This is very interesting. If I'm not mistaken, I have explained this, in the previous, in the first program, or the first summer school program that I participated. I'm not sure, I think it was last year. Economic, again, I will explain, the meaning is encapsulated in the word, or is found in the, is understood by what we call as exchange. So economic has to involve exchange. It must involve exchange. So you will hear, proverb or idiom in English, no man is an island. Nobody can survive on its own. He or she or it, if it's a company, has to exchange, has to change something with another person. So economic is also the same. Okay, so sorry, in the context of international economic law, is also the same. The exchange process does not involve individual, but it involves states. And law is, I think everybody should know already. What do we mean by law? Okay, all right. Now we move to the next slide, nature of world trading system. All right, now the explanation here, or the graphic here is more complicated, okay, because you have so many things to look at, and you have to know how to relate, all the boxes. Okay, okay, just forget this box, private international law, which is on the left side of the slide. We just focus on the one which is in the center first. Okay, now why I put public international law on top of these 4 boxes, or these 4 things? Okay, because international economic law is a branch of public international law. So we have to understand that public international law is law that governs relations between states, relations. The relations between Malaysia and Indonesia is governed by public international law. So in the context of the economic relations, so the law will be international economic law, which comprises international trade. Okay, international trade means here exchange again. Okay, what has been done for a very long time, since time immemorial, is exchange of goods. There has been this activity for a very long time, even before the colonial powers came to this region, to the region of Indo-Malay region. I call it Indo-Malay, or maybe the Nusantara region. Trade is something which has been thriving, not only in, in Malaysia, the states which form Malaysia, but also the states or the kingdom or the sultanates that form Indonesia. And that is why the European powers came here, because they want to monopolize trade in spices, which is so important at that time, which was so important at that time. And then international monetary is another component. International monetary denotes the importance of money. So if you want to exchange something, if you are a buyer, then you will exchange the money that you have with the good that you want to buy. You go to the market, and you can go to Alfamart, you want to buy bread. So you have to have money with you. So the money, the value of the money is important to be regulated. If the money, I still remember in 1998, Indonesia was not in a very good shape because of the reformation, and then, the crisis that happened in the country. Rupiah's value was so low. So what actually caused that particular thing to happen? So that's why we need to know what is international monetary. International investment is another component. International investment means, again, it involves, cross-border, something which is beyond your border. Let's say now Indonesia is developing very, 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 very well. I have to say that, Indonesia now, the level of development, the pace of development is very fast. And that also involves the development of the infrastructures, development of ports, the building of highways, the building of a new capital city in Kalimantan. So say you do not have enough capital in the country, so you need people from outside to invest. Now there is a specific branch of international economic law that concerns the protection of these foreign investors. And finally, development, international development. We will go to that later. And why I say non-trade issues, because there's also the involvement of issues which do not relate to the crux, the thrust, the pillar, apa yang dipanggil sebagai apa ya, asas. Dalam bahasa Melayu itu asas. Indonesia juga asas. The thrust of international economic system is international trade, and the thrust of international trade is free trade. Now, not everything should be regulated, not everything should be controlled on the basis of free trade. You have, for example, issues like human rights, issues of indigenous people's rights, issues of environment, and that's affecting not only Indonesia, but also Malaysia, such as palm oil. So these all form part of the world trading system. Now we move to the next component of my presentation, or the next component of my presentation, which I'm going to explain the components of international economic law. All right. I hope you can see the font. I hope that it's not too small. Okay. Now, when we talk about components of international economic law, it reflects the previous two slides that I have explained to you. What are the components of international economic law? We can divide it at least. I say at least because there can be other components as well. The first component is international trade. That's why you have WTO there. Okay, if you have a look at this slide, okay, the one which has the row at the top denotes the concept. Sorry, denotes the concept. So denotes the principle of international trade, the principle of international monetary law, the principle of international development law. It can also be the discipline under the whole umbrella of international economic law. So this is the conceptual thing. But the one which is at the bottom is the institution. This shows the importance of institutions in international economic law. So you have to understand also how the institutions work, how the politics within the institution work, how states, and this is again is very important, because international economic law is part of international public international law. The underlying concept is states, and states are sovereign. Then they are equally sovereign. So the law cannot dictate state in the same way as domestic law, let's say Indonesian law, Malaysian law, dictate individuals in Indonesia or subjects of Indonesian law who are the individuals in Indonesia. Similarly, the Malaysian law. You have to understand that very clearly. So the state can say that we don't want to be bound by the law. Yes, they can, provided that they do not consent to it. But once they have already done that, they are bound. Because you have a principle that says that once you have already subscribed to an international law principle, particularly those who are in treaty, for example, okay, so you have to be bound by it. We have the other component that is international investment law. So I have already explained all these four, and we are going to go one by one, yeah? All right, so we start with international trade. Okay, for the WTO, the World Trade Organization, okay, you can see that because I'm given only 40 minutes, I don't have so many slides. And to tell you the truth, this subject I have to teach for my master's student for 1 semester. For my undergraduate student, I teach for 2 weeks. Yeah? It's part of public international law too. Unfortunately, public international law is going to be reduced in its content. It's going to be only offered in the first, in only 1 semester. So there's possibility international economic law will be removed from the syllabus. And there is a possibility also that international economic law is going to be offered as an elective subject. I think most of you are already familiar with the system in our law school. And I think it's the same thing also in the law schools in Indonesia. All right. Now, international trade is so important, and in fact, it's a part of my life because I did my PhD in WTO law. My master's also the dissertation in UKM. I chose a topic of the WTO. Just to tell you a story. When I did my PhD, I had to go through a lot of hardships, a lot of challenges, because at that time in 2003 when I started my PhD, very few people very few people specialize in the WTO in WTO law. So I had a tough time to explain to people that international trade that I study and I did my PhD on is not about the international trade law that normally is used to be understood by many lawyers. Okay, I think I forgot to explain one thing here. Thank God. All right. The one which I put in the box here, private international law. Okay. So as I said, okay, at the time when, at first, I discovered, my interest in international economic law, so many people say, are you doing something related to the, for example, Incoterms? So, what is Incoterms? The terms which are put into the contracts between exporters and importers. Do you do, is your thesis or PhD or research is about letter of credit? No, I do not do things which relate to private international law. So what's the difference between private international and public international law? As I said, public international law concerns relations between states. Private international law concerns relations between individuals. So going back to international trade law, international trade regulation, as I am going to explain today, is not private international law trade law. So it's not private international trade law, sorry. It's public international trade law. So it's the rules that govern the relations between state when it comes to trade. When it comes to trade. I give you example. Okay, if you go to the airport, okay, what you will find, okay, let's say you want to go to Malaysia. We hope that, after COVID, so many people want to go to Indonesia, and I know that so many of my Indonesian friends want to go to Malaysia. Now we need to go to Malaysia. Okay, one of the, I would say, the hurdle that you have to go through, I use the word hurdle, is the hurdle which is manned. Manned means dijalankan, dioperasikan, operationalized by the customs. In Indonesia, we call bea cukai. You know why? Because I had the opportunity to do a comparative research between our Royal Custom, Malaysia Royal Custom, and also bea cukai Indonesia. Okay, so why bea cukai is there at the airport? Because each country in the world has policies on controlling goods going out and coming into the country. Okay, I repeat. Each country in the world has policy, has law, has rules, has regulation on the movement of goods, okay, into the country, imports, or out of the country, export. And I want to explain to you, it's very interesting. You know why? Because now Malaysia is going to, in fact, we have already filed a case before the WTO because of the palm oil against the EU. EU had already done something unfair to our palm oil. But I'm not sure how far that Malaysia and Indonesia may work together to take action against, in taking action against the EU, European Union. Okay, so the WTO is the organization which is the relevant organization. All right. Now, that's why I said I only have 2 slides for the WTO, but I'm going to explain, as elaborate as possible. Because I don't have the luxury of consulting my slides, because I don't want to spend too long for this particular session. I think I want to welcome a lot of questions, discussions, not only question, also discussion. Okay, now the next slide here that you can see is actually the workings of the WTO. Okay, WTO is a treaty institution, it's a treaty framework. Okay, and if you are interested to study WTO, maybe in your master's or PhD, okay, don't be taken aback. Maksudnya takut, okay, taken aback by the fact that the treaties of the WTO are very thick. It's this thick. I forgot to bring. Okay, this is my book. Okay, this is not an international. It is international book. It's as thick as this. It's as thick as this. Just the treaty, the agreements. Why? Because we have so many agreements. We have The first is the agreement establishing the WTO. This is what we call the constituent treaty for WTO. Why WTO has to have a treaty just for itself? Because historically, okay, WTO was preceded, the predecessor of WTO, okay, was supposed to be ITO, International Trade Organization, but ITO was shot down, was killed by United States. Okay, as early as in 1947. That's why we call GATT WTO here. Okay, GATT, a General Agreement on Trade and Services. Sorry, this is GATT. This one, Multilateral Agreement on Trade in Goods. Okay, I think I can just type something. General. Okay, if you come across this word, okay, you remember that it is part and has to be read together with WTO. General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Okay, the GATT. Okay, GATT is part of the WTO. Okay, that's why after, okay, I think it's too small here now. Okay, after the agreement establishing WTO, okay, you have the multilateral agreement on trade in goods. Okay, this multilateral agreement on trade in goods is very, very thick. It's a lot of them, covers so many things. At the same time, we also have other aspects of trade. That's why there are three main areas. First is trade in goods, the traditional area. Then what is important about WTO is the WTO has expanded the area of, things which are regulated, not only to trade in goods, but also to trade in services. Okay, to trade in services. And it also include now intellectual property rights. Okay, what is trade in services? Now we are not only talking about goods, we're also talking about services. In international trade now, especially the trade of developed countries or advanced countries, trade in services play a very important role. Okay, so there are different type of trade in services. For example, okay, we have those who want to provide their services in other countries. Let's say I'm a lawyer, or you are a lawyer. Okay, Tisha, you are a lawyer. You want to now, provide your legal service to a client in Japan. Now, it's not goods, it's services. But then, the rules under the WTO will apply. The rules are found in GATS. And there's also trade-related intellectual property rights. This is what we call TRIPS. Okay, example now, which is very, very relevant, is the COVID-19 vaccines. Okay, why COVID-19 vaccines can trigger the application of WTO rules? Because WTO rules under the TRIPS, this is trade-related intellectual property rights, doesn't allow countries to infringe the rights of IP right owner of each member, or else you breach WTO. So when it comes to vaccine, most of the vaccines, the question now is whether it is patentable or not. And if it's patentable or it has been patented, how do we, get access to cheap vaccines? So these are the things that we are now being discussed by the WTO. Next, fundamentals of the WTO system. These are the principles. Okay, if we want to just focus on WTO, even I think 2 days will not be enough. So that's why I go very, very briefly. First is single undertaking, the first fundamental. Okay, in the previous slide, we know that there are three main areas, right? Trade in goods, trade in services, and intellectual property rights. Now, what do we mean by single undertaking? Single undertaking, very simple. There is a word in English, okay? Take it or leave it. So you cannot say, oh, I only want trade in goods. I don't want trade in services. No, you have to take all. But that means that all the various international agreements that form the system of the WTO law have to be accepted by all members of WTO. I have said that the underlying principle of WTO is free trade. What do you mean by free trade? You have to provide market access to goods coming from other countries. You cannot be protectionist. Okay, I have to say, Indonesia is quite a protectionist country. So to some of you who have gone to Malaysia, you will see that if you go to the supermarket, you see a lot of goods coming from many countries, right? That's why many of my friends say, oh, I really like when I am in Kuala Lumpur. You have so many imported goods. But in Indonesia, they have to be like more cautious, more careful in opening up their market. Imagine they open up to their market to goods coming from United States. Okay, so what happened to the poor farmers, for example, and if you talk about agriculture product? So this is the thing we become a challenge to countries like Indonesia. Okay, so single undertaking, the general rule is you have to accept all. But there are a few exceptions. I don't need to go into the exceptions. So one of the exceptions is actually government procurement. So government procurement is not subject to single undertaking. So all countries in the world, all states in the world, they can have their own, system, which is quite different. Okay, protection through tariffs only. What is tariff? Tariff is customs duty. Okay, and you cannot use quantitative restriction. You know what is quantitative restriction? Quantitative restriction is like quota. And Indonesia is now doing this. I have a student, a PhD student from Indonesia. I asked him to do PhD on the export restriction of mineral products. Now, it's not import restriction, it's export restriction. So I asked him to find ways to justify the action by Indonesia to restrict their export. Export of what? Export of raw material. Indonesia is rich in raw material. So Indonesia should not let their raw material to be sold very cheaply. Dijual sangat murah in international market. The raw material should be used by your own industry, but then there will be a risk of you violating the WTO rules. Because why? Because if you want to protect, you have to protect through tariffs. What is tariff? It's import duty or export duty. Why import duty or export duty is preferable? Because it's more objective. And it is more transparent. You cannot use like complete ban, or you cannot use like, quantitative restriction is like, for example, you ask, for example, license and things like that. And then we have non-discrimination. It's very important. What do you mean by non-discrimination? Okay, each country, members of the WTO, they cannot give treatment first to one country which is less favorable, more favorable than goods coming from other countries. This is most favored nation, or national treatment. National treatment, you cannot give, you cannot give treatment which is less favorable to imports than to your own goods. But of course, for national treatment, you have to understand there are the concepts that you have to understand. The concepts are found in Article 3 of the GATT and also the relevant provision of the GATT. I cannot just say, it's illegal. No. If you fulfills, I give you an example. Example is if you have a tax, value-added tax. The value-added tax that you impose on import cannot be higher than the value-added tax you impose on local goods, or else you breach national treatment. Unfortunately, Indonesia is one of the countries that have been subject to WTO actions, and they were defeated in the WTO. It started with the automobile case, and then the latest one is a halal case, halal product. Then, my student asked me, why Malaysia did not face that problem? Like, we have automobile, we have Proton, but we don't have that problem. So you have to learn from Malaysia, I think. Okay, then reciprocity. Reciprocity means what you give, you will get. So that's why the basis of WTO is negotiation. So we continue to negotiate, okay, so that we get concession. We call it concession. Enforcement obligations, safety valves, transparency. Enforcement obligation is dispute settlement. Safety valves means there are few concepts that you can use as exceptions. If you can open all, if you open. This is the thing, I think, let's say Indonesia or Malaysia are brought to the WTO by another country for arguably violating the WTO rules. We have to rely on the safety valves. And unfortunately, most of the lawyers are not from this part of the world. Even Malaysia or Indonesia, if we have dispute before WTO, we have to rely on lawyers from Europe or from America. Okay, so I think you have to build your capacity on that. And transparency is another thing. Okay, so we have finished with WTO. We are going to move to the next part, that is international monetary law. Okay, now international trade, I have said, okay, concern at least three things. First, the goods that you exchange, services you exchange. Okay, example of services is, as I said just now, okay, if let's say you want to provide service outside the country, or let's say you want to provide legal service to Malaysia. Okay, now there are certain rules or certain regime that's already put in place where, okay, because services is quite different from goods. The way that you negotiate is you have to identify what sector that you want to open. Indonesia also will identify. Now we open, for example, food and beverage. When we open food and beverage, Malaysia will open hotel. Now we have hotels owned by Indonesian companies. Okay, before the COVID, there are many Malaysian restaurants operating in Indonesia. So with this, there will be more trade. And when there's more trade, there will be better option for consumers. Okay, that is for services. And then we have TRIPS just now, interproperty. Now, what about monetary law? Okay, monetary law, money is very important. If there's no money, then there will be no value. You can't store value without money. Okay, don't ask me about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is something new. We just talk about the currency that we have. Okay, we just talk about the currency that we have. Okay, the background is we have to talk about IMF. And IMF is very important to Indonesia because Indonesia was a recipient of IMF bantuan assistance. Okay, because of what happened in 1998. Okay, Malaysia did not take assistance from IMF. Then you may ask me why or how. Okay, now what is the Great Depression? Great Depression happened in United States. Okay, United States became a very, very important player in the world politics and also international economy starting from the end of the 19th century into the early or the starting of the 20th century. Okay, the First World War, after First World War, America became a superpower. Okay, now what happened? Economy also, America became one of the biggest economic power at that time. And America, you have to understand, America subscribed to libertarianism. What is libertarianism? Libertarianism, no control from the government. Government is small. Okay, government cannot play role in economics. Economics have to be left to the enterprise. The enterprise is everyone can be. The enterprise has the capital. The enterprise can innovate. The enterprise can enhance their growth. Okay, and the enterprise will provide jobs to the people, not the government. This is what we call as the laissez-faire, but laissez-faire is more related to British. American is libertarianism. So what happened at that time? America and the American government, of course, the market also. The market, especially in property market, boom. When it boom, suddenly it bubble. You know what is bubble? Burst. When it burst, people lost their. Okay, it started with the downfall of the stock market in New York, and people lost their investment. When the people lost their investment, okay, they bought houses. When they bought houses. This happened in Malaysia. They bought houses not to stay, not to reside. They bought, let's say, 10 houses because why? Because they take it as investment. I think this is also happening in Indonesia. But at that time, when people have a lot of money, people buy and buy and buy. Suddenly, the stock market crash. The stock market crash, everybody lost their job, and then nobody wants to buy the house or rent the house. So it became a domino effect. Okay. Now, what happened? The American government, especially the Congress, started to impose protectionist measure, trade protectionist, and then also impose monetary restriction. Okay, what is monetary restriction? Now, the United States at that time, the Federal Reserve restrict buying abroad. So they say to the American, don't go to Europe, because at that time, Americans go to Europe. Okay, because the economy of the world is still not established elsewhere. It's between Europe, okay, United States, and to some extent Hong Kong, maybe, or Japan. At that time, Japan has already started, but still not as advanced. Okay, so they say don't go to Europe, buy only in United States. And then holding foreign exchange. They hold foreign exchange. They say that we are not going to let foreign exchange to be what? To be distributed. Okay, and also devalue the currency. What do you mean by devalue currency? Okay, your currency, rupiah, my currency, I mean Malaysian currency, ringgit, how does it work? How does it work? It works this way. Okay, we don't have a single currency for the world. Okay, there's no single currency for the world. So each country, sovereign country, has its own currency. So what it does, okay, now the currency is not backed by gold. Last time it's backed by gold. Even before that, people use what? People use gold, silver coin. Now they use what we call as fiat money. What is fiat money? The money doesn't have value because of itself. No, the value is actually backed by the state because it becomes a legal tender. Okay, it becomes a legal tender, so it back. Now, how do you know that the value of rupiah is like this or the value of ringgit is like that? You look at some factors. I give you example. If the country export a lot, import little, okay, that means what happened? Okay, when you export, foreign currency will move into your country. Okay, Indonesia export, foreign currency from outside will enter Indonesia. If you export to Malaysia, Malaysia buy your product, okay, Malaysian ringgit will flow into Indonesia. Okay, it's good for you. Yes, it's good for you, but you have to understand, economic activities is not only trade in goods. You have, for example, movement of capital. You have also movement of IP. I give you example, United States. United States, okay, it always suffer deficit in terms of trade. What do you mean by deficit? It import more than exporting. Why? Because the labor rate, okay, labor cost is high in United States. So it's not profitable It will not make sense if you open a factory in United States, because the wage is high, the salary is high. And that's why now there's movement of investors from countries like Malaysia. Last time from Malaysia, it moves to Thailand. Now Thailand move and then move to Vietnam, and now it moves to Indonesia, and Indonesia feels very happy. Why? Tesla is going to open. In fact, it has opened already. I'm not sure. Tesla, so many, Western and American countries are now want to invest in Indonesia. That means a lot of money will pour into Indonesia. But you have to understand this carefully. The money will pour into Indonesia, but then it will move back to their country. Why? I give you an example. Okay, United States just now, right? United States, okay, suffer deficit in terms of trade. But where does America get its money? It gets its money from IP. Okay, Microsoft, imagine everyone in the world use Microsoft, and how much do we pay the royalty? Per year, sometimes you pay 200 ringgit, or maybe 100 ringgit. One person, imagine 1 billion pay, how much money America get. I mean, the movement from outside into the country. So this will decide. There's so many other things, for example, debt and things like that. If let's say want to ask, then I will explain later on. Okay, they did not work. Trade project did not work. So what happened? Okay, the IMF treaty was negotiated by two persons as the champion. The first is John Maynard Keynes. John Maynard Keynes is American economist. Okay, I see some Malaysians also here. Lawyer in Malaysia, normally the knowledge of economics is not very good. Why? Because we are purists. Okay. And also for Indonesian, if you want to know how a Malaysian economy works, tapi jangan cerita-cerita orang nanti keluar YouTube lah. Susah. I cannot explain lah because this one come out in YouTube, Mr. Randy. Okay. I will not tell everything lah because some of them, maybe just a hypothesis, my own hypothesis. I'm afraid that, I'm wrong. But Malaysia's economy is very much modeled after UK economy. That's why we follow Keynesian economics. Keynesian economics believe in state intervention, but control intervention. I give an example. This is very, very controversial in Malaysia. Malaysia, I still remember I presented in, unfortunately, Indonesia, they are not that hostile. I presented in some countries, even in ASEAN. They're quite hostile when they know I'm from Malaysia and I'm explaining to them economic law, Malaysian economic law. They say, is Malaysia a racist country? I say, no. But you understand that we have, we have policies, we have laws which favor some, I would say, indigenous people. Indigenous people mean Malays. Why? Because at that time, okay, the British, was introduced by the British, not by the current government after independence. The British saw that they have to create a kind of something that provide equity. That's why they say you can still, let's say the non-Malays, they can still, work very hard. They become business, and in fact, they're very rich. Okay, but a certain portion of the economy is reserved. For example, public service and things like that. But now it has been, removed. Slowly has been removed. Why? Because the government needs to look into not only the business or the enterprise or the market. Market doesn't dictate everything. Okay. There are people who are vulnerable, people who will not benefit from the market, the government must come in. The SMEs, the micro enterprises, the government has to help. Okay, now these two persons, help with the drafting of IMF treaty. Okay, and what's the instrument? Okay, this one I don't need to explain now because I need to save time. All right, now what are the features of IMF regulation? First is non-binding. Why? It works, IMF works like a company, like a bank. Okay, and its coordination through synchronization or joint formulation of monetary policy. So all countries, central bank, Bank Indonesia, Bank Negara Indonesia, Bank Negara Malaysia, so they will synchronize their action in formulating monetary policy, the best for everyone, especially the one which regards what? Which regards currency exchange, because we don't want countries to compete unnecessarily to make sure that the value is higher or lower. Sometimes it's not only to make your value, the value of currency higher. Sometimes countries, okay, they manipulate their currency to show that as if their currency is not very strong. Why? Because they want to make sure their goods are cheap. If your currency, okay, this is another thing that Indonesia has to understand. Okay, the moment your economy goes up, what will happen? People go out from poverty, they got money, okay, the labor cost will increase. Okay, when labor cost increase, salary increase, what will happen? Your money also will become stronger. When your money becomes stronger, then what will happen? Your goods will become less competitive in terms of price. Okay, this Malaysia we have already gone through it already. When we gone through it, we cannot survive anymore. We cannot export anymore goods. So we have to focus on certain niche area. Surveillance means that, they will conduct surveillance, and centralized but regional cooperation is considered complementary. Okay, what articles of agreement for IMF promote? Oversee international monetary system. Okay, everyone, who is involved in international trade. In fact, if you are outside your country as tourists, the monetary system is very important. If the monetary system crumble, then you go to some countries, they don't accept your currency, or they say, I'm not going to accept your currency to be exchanged with their own currency. Certain countries like that. They say, we want US dollars. So it's not good. Okay, it's not good for both countries. So the international monetary system is overseen by IMF, Articles of Agreement, or AOA. Second, promote elimination of exchange restrictions. Okay, what do you mean by exchange restriction? Exchange restriction means, like Malaysia, we have a large number of Indonesian workers. Indonesian workers, they earn money. And Malaysia cannot stop these Indonesian workers to bring back their money to their country. It's illegal. Cannot be done. IMF says that you can't. And it's unfair. They have worked very hard. They want their money to go back to Indonesia. Okay, so that's why Malaysia lost billions of dollars, because of this remission of money from workers, foreign workers. And stability of exchange rates is also important. All right. Now, the working of IMF, members pool resources based on monetary contribution, based on quota. The greater the greater the quota, the greater the contribution. So the greater the amount it can draw on IMF resources. So what happened is this: all countries in the world, they will contribute their currency as a pool, like bank. You deposit your money. And then if let's say you face what we call as balance of payment problem, meaning you import too much, you do not export. This, I think, Indonesia has faced a problem like this. Import a lot, you don't export. So what happened to your currency? Your currency goes down and down and down. So what do? You ask help from IMF. IMF will provide you with what? With foreign currency. Okay, that's why there's a difference in terms of views whether the concept is loan or member purchase of USD. This one is more conceptual lah. Okay, so finish with IMF. Now we go to international investment law. Okay, now international investment law is very interesting. You know why? Because like what I said, Indonesia's economy is expanding. When it expands, so there will be a lot of investment. And there are bad and, not say bad and good things, but there are pros and cons. All right. Now, there are specific rules under the under the International Economic Law on investment. And they are found in either BIT. BIT is Bilateral Investment Treaty between two countries, or Investment Chapter of Free Trade Agreements. Example, ASEAN. ASEAN, we have AKIA. RCEP, there is the investment chapter. TPPA has investment chapter. Okay. Now, I just focus on a few elements which are important. Okay, this one is, elements of BIT given. I don't need to explain. I think you can read on your own. But what I want to highlight here is it's reciprocal. Meaning, you may view international investment treaty to be something as a threat to your sovereignty. Why? Because it regulates the conduct of your government, which can impact the foreign investor. If the government introduce a law that take away some portion of the profit of the investor, then the investor can take action. Why? Because you, as a country which is a member to the BIT, has breached the BIT. The purpose is to encourage investment. Then you say to yourself, is it good to become a party to BIT? But you have to understand also, sometimes there will be a reverse of fortune. It is your country who invests in other countries, and your company who invests in other country. Then you will use BIT to protect your own company. Okay, now these are the scope of BIT, the scope and definition, admission. Okay, I think national treatment and most favored nation we have explained. What I want to highlight is fair and equitable treatment. I just focus on this. The rest, and also the last one, dispute settlement mechanism. Why is related? I want to focus on FET, or fair and equitable treatment, because this fair and equitable treatment is the component of international investment law that many developing countries, they are scared of. Why they are scared of? I give you an example. Okay, a company, big company from United States, invest in Indonesia. Yeah, I know for a fact that Indonesia has a lot of law, and the law is based on the highest. It must be based on the constitution. Okay. Now let's say the foreign investor ask so many things from the government, and the government say cannot, because we have to protect the people, we have to protect this, protect that. Okay. Whereas the foreign investor has already put 10 billion US dollars in its investment, and because of the law that you put in place, they cannot make money. Then what they can do? They can bring an action to Investor State Dispute Settlement, or ISDS. Okay, they will go to arbitration. In fact, there is already a case, a few cases involving Indonesia, and the matter has already also triggered the debate, on whether the Indonesian courts should enforce the awards made by the international body, arbitration body. Okay, finally, we go to international development law. Okay, international development law is the least binding element of international economic law. Okay, it involves rights and duties of state involved in the development process. Okay, now the states involved are not only developing countries, but all nations. Because why? Because you're talking about the welfare dimension of international economic law. Okay, so the basis is justice. All right, the basis is justice. So that's why we have the bodies such as the World Bank. Okay, we have the World Bank, which is important. Which plays a very important role. Can I know how many more minutes do I have? Is my time up?
5 minutes again,
okay,
sir.
Thank you. All right. The weaknesses of IDL is that it lacks coherence in its institutional framework. Most of the time, when we talk about IDL, it's decentralized. And I think Indonesia has passed already this time. This era, the era that you focus too much on IDL. Why? Because Indonesia now, the economy is already, we have already reached the level where you are now handling your own economy. You don't need to rely on others. But for countries in in Africa, they need assistance from other countries. Secondly, Indonesia can move from being recipient of assistance or aid to becoming the giver or provider of aid. They can provide aid to other countries. Now they can provide assistance to other countries' development. Now the issue in this situation is this. Okay, in English there is a word. This is a phrase. There is a phrase. There is no free lunch. You know what is no free lunch? Nobody is going to give you help without getting something in return. If you get help from United States, they have like the USAID, you get help from the Department of International Development from various countries in Europe, from China. There's an issue of China now. China is giving a lot of assistance. Is it in terms of investment, in terms of money? Is it good? Of course, they want something in return. Maybe they say, okay, now I give you assistance to develop, certain part of East Indonesia, in Sulawesi, but we want to get contracts. That is why, as a country, as a sovereign country, you have to be a bit careful. I'm not saying that assistance is not good. Okay, the problem now is like I said, okay, there is lack of coherence in institutional framework, and you have to rely a lot on, soft law. Sustainable development, is not clearly defined. But what is sustainability? Okay, sustainability. Okay, you look not only at your own generation, at our generation. We have to consider the welfare, the interest of the future generation. That's why you can't exhaust the depleting natural resources. This is the thing that I think Indonesia has to rely on if they say they want to, they want to put some restriction on exportation of raw minerals. Okay, and then we have the UN Development Group. Okay, we have the UNHCR, ILO. The role is financial aid, technical assistance, standard setting, and provision of forum for discussion and negotiation. Now I want to, now we move to the last component. Okay, the last component. Okay, it's so fast. Huh? I cannot imagine that I can finish in just 45 minutes. All right, just one slide. Okay, this what do you call this? Is it a chart? It's not a chart, right? Table. This table, I did it myself. I did not copy from anyone else. Okay, but of course I got the data from internet. Okay, why I produce this table? Because I want every one of us to look at the difference between Malaysia and Indonesia. Sometimes when we do not look at the map, we don't look at the population size, we don't look at the size of the economy, we forgot that Malaysia and Indonesia are different. Okay, and you know why? Because I watch the YouTube. So many people like to compare between these two countries. These two countries a lot of in common. In fact, I presented in one very interesting conference in Chulalongkorn on sociology of law. I think 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the sociologists have already been talking about what we call as the globalization from below. The government doesn't want to globalize, but the people want, You go to the YouTube, you can get your friend easily. And now your friend, and because of COVID, it makes things even, not to say worse, but it makes things more and more unpredictable. You don't see your friend. But now, because of the YouTube, we have so many friends in Malaysia and vice versa. Malaysia also do the same thing. Okay, and what happened? You exchange ideas. Last time you don't know, oh, actually Malaysia is like this. The Malaysians say, oh, Indonesia like this. And that's why, to tell you the truth now, okay, this is a bit, very, very frank. Last time, Malaysians like to use the word Indon, but now they don't use because they know that the word Indon is derogative. So they say Indo or Indonesia. So it's not something that a bad intention, but they don't know. What they call the Indonesian now, oh, okay, all right, the situation in Malaysia is like this, like that. All right. So if you look at the size, Indonesia is huge. The population is big. The economy is very big. Okay. But then Malaysia is small. We are a small country with 32 million population. Okay. If I'm not mistaken, the West Java province now has about 60 million, right? 50 to 60 million population. Imagine. Double the population of Malaysia. Okay. But the economy of Malaysia is quite big. Okay, the economy is big. That is about 387 billion. Okay, it's big because why? Because we have a lot of investment, we have a lot of manufacturing, we have a lot of commodity. Okay, palm oil, and we also have oil and gas. All right, but you look, the difference now is in the political
Sir,
system.
1 minute again.
Okay, you look at the political system, the legal system, okay, and also the guiding economic policy. Okay, Malaysia, we don't have guiding economic policy. Indonesia has guiding economic policy. So if you want to put in place, okay, we never know. After this, you are going to be lawyers. Or maybe you will be working with the government or politician. You have to understand the difference. In Indonesia, the biggest challenge is you have Pancasila. And Sila number 5 is very, very powerful in the sense that there are things which we can do in Malaysia, but you cannot do in Indonesia. And another important thing is the control by government of the economy in Indonesia is legal. Everything must be passed by the parliament. In Malaysia, it's administrative. For your information, Malaysia, we don't know whether we have government or not now. Okay, we don't know we have government or not. We don't know. But the government works. Why? Because we got this from the British. All right. So it dualist. Okay, it means that international law. Okay, the last one, does not have direct application in Malaysia. Okay, but Indonesia, I do not know. That's why I put the asterisk here. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, it's a pleasure for me to explain to you. If we welcome all question or maybe discussion. Okay, after this, thank you very much again.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hanif Ahmad, for your insightful and excellent presentation. It would be valuable for all of us here. Okay, next we step forward to the Q&A session. For the participant, if you have any question for our notable speaker, please raise your hand and unmute your speaker. Then you speak directly to our notable speaker. Or you can typing down on the chat column. Is there any question? Is there any question? Okay, Dr. Hanif Ahmad, is it any question from my colleagues, Mr. Bagus Rahmanda? We know that many kind of trade agreements, multilateral trade agreements. For example, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP. Its agreement signed on the sideline of the ASEAN Summit on November 2020. Then signed by 10 Asian countries along with China, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, and Australia. However, if this international agreement successfully ratified through domestic law, what are the advantage, challenge, and obstacle that faced by developing countries such as Indonesia and Malaysia by implementing this agreement? For Dr. Hanif Ahmad, the time to answer is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Handi, and also Mr. Bagus, right? Pak
Yeah.
Bagus.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a very, very good question, why? Because both Malaysia and Indonesia are, Malaysia has ratified the RCEP. And Malaysia is also a party to the TPP, the CPTPP. Okay. Now, if you compare between the two mega regulation or mega, we call it mega regulation. Why mega regulatory treaties? It is not multilateral in a way, because multilateral should only be reserved to the WTO. It's a huge, so I mean it's a I would say mega regulation. Now, we have to understand the intention or who are the main player. The main player for the RCEP is of course China. Okay, the purpose of China in negotiating RCEP at one time was actually to respond to United States TPP. Okay, United States TPP definitely is to face China. So now, if you say that, what should we do, like Malaysia, Indonesia? The first thing that we have to know, okay, what advantage do you get from your trade with China, and what advantage you get from trade with United States? Okay, now I don't say that, I'm not saying that we forget other countries. Yes, RCEP has Australia, RCEP has other countries, but you've got to understand, look at the history of bilateral trade agreements that you have with those countries. If you already have bilateral agreements with those countries, the RCEP becomes like, a kind of, in WTO law, we call as like a spaghetti bowl, or apa ya? Mie ayam. There's so many, like, intertwined, so there's so many things there that at the end, you cannot identify what aspect of the, let's say, RCEP that really has a difference. What difference does it make? Okay, whereas you already have your bilateral negotiation, that is happening, and in fact, the negotiation is always, moving forward. Okay, the thing that you have to understand is, okay, in our own government, sometimes they do not have, standard, I would say, a standard benchmark when they want to negotiate. Sometimes the Ministry of International Trade Industry, what is their objective? What is the mandate? They want to make sure they want to get as many or as much investment as possible. But you have to look at the Ministry of Agriculture. The Ministry of Agriculture will say, Ministry of Kelautan, Maritime, you say, hey, we have to protect our own people. So that's why it's very important for you to take a holistic view of this mega regulation treaty. Okay, what happened to our TPP last time? Okay, for RCEP, yeah, there are a lot of issues. There are a lot of things that we are quite nervous. Not to say nervous, we are quite cautious when it comes to, dealing with RCEP. Okay, but it is not as intense as TPP. Because TPP, we look from the angle of the IP. United States really want to force for a very strong IP protection. Okay, I give you an example. If let's say you have, another thing is investment. Okay, the thing that we have to be careful is investment protection, investor protection. Why? The investor protection, like RCEP, is actually an FTA that will become an avenue for the ISDS. Okay, the Investor State Dispute Settlement. Okay, so Indonesia, as the recipient of investment from the countries that are members of the RCEP, okay, you have to be careful. Why? If let's say the government do something that the investor feel prevents them from, okay, making profit or making a lot of profit, all right, then they can say, now you have breached already the RCEP. So what to be blamed? So who is to be blamed? Not the government, not the let's say, because we have government, the provincial level, we have the local level, we have the federal level. The whole state will be responsible, and in the end, you will see, some country has to pay millions of dollars in compensation. All right. So these are the things that you have to be careful. And then one more thing is labor. Okay, because Indonesia is very strict on labor. We know that there are issues, foreign labor from, for example, from China. Okay. Now, there are issues that you have to see whether, okay, you have to provide, I mean, there's an obligation of non-discrimination. Sorry, non-discrimination obligation. You cannot discriminate. So I'm not sure, because I have not gone through the provision one by one, but I think there are a lot of safeguards which all the negotiators from most countries, including Malaysia and also Indonesia, have already thought of. Okay, normally they will put it in the annex or annexes as exceptions. So for Malaysia, there's a few things that we are cautious. I have some few things, but I don't know if I can say it. Example, in Malaysia we have like the 5G. The 5G is involvement of companies from China. I don't want to name you the company. The 5G, the technology. So there is an issue of government procurement. Okay, government procurement is also important. Why? Because government procurement, as I've told you, is exception to the single undertaking principle under the WTO. Under WTO, government procurement is excluded from the multilateral obligation. But if you are parties to an FTA like RCEP, there's a specific chapter on government procurement, and you have to also be cautious on that matter. All right, you have to be cautious on that matter. If let's say there's a one of the things that normally are put forward, in our FTA is you cannot use direct negotiation. You have to use open tender. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Hanif Ahmad, what should we do to face this reality in order our country not harmed by this agreement?
Okay, you cannot prevent harm from happening because the interests are intertwined. What do you mean by intertwined? Intertwined. You have interests which benefit from the liberalization. You have interests who are harmed by the liberalization. The problem with the underlying ideology that is free trade developed by Adam Smith is you cannot protect. You have to work on your own. If you cannot survive, you have to adjust. If you cannot adjust, leave the market. So what happened to Malaysia? I tell you, this happened to Malaysia because we are quite pro. Only to say we subscribe a lot to free trade. At one time, we have strong coffee industry. We open up to Vietnam. Our coffee sector died. Okay, but we still enjoy coffee in Kuala Lumpur. But it's just imported coffee. Okay, I tell you, we also face the same problem with paddy, with rice. We open up. Why? Because Malaysia, as you can see from the slide just now, we only have 32 million population. You cannot use the same benchmark. It is going to be 300 million. The most important thing that you have to know is what are the sectors that will face the threat from liberalization. Then you cannot protect forever. You can only protect for a short period of time. If you fail to make them efficient, okay, look at the nature of the respective FTA, whether they use positive listing or negative listing. This is quite technical. Okay, if it uses positive listing, it's okay. If it uses negative listing, we will be in trouble. What do you mean by negative listing? Negative listing means, I'm not sure. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Okay, it's two ways. The first way is, okay, I'm not sure if they're positive listing because I may be wrong, but there are two ways. First way, or the first method is, if in terms of liberalization, if it's mentioned as an exclusion in the FTA, then what happened? Then you can close from liberalization. That one is very dangerous. Why? This happened with TPP. TPP means you have to list down all the sectors that you don't want to liberalize. And there is another obligation for gradual liberalization. After a certain while, you have to liberalize and liberalize and liberalize. In the end, no protection. But there is another type of FTA, free trade agreement, which says like this. Okay, if you do not mention, okay, in the treaty or in the agreement, okay, you have the freedom to protect. But I'm not sure RCEP. The CPTPP used the first one. So that's why, we were very cautious at that time. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ahmad. Okay, we go to next question from Ms. Tan Ejin from Taylor University, Malaysia. Hi, Professor. with the rising Chinese economic and the political tension between China and America, does this affect the economy in Indonesia and Malaysia differently? Because Indonesia take a legalistic position on economic decision while Malaysia is administrative. Please,
Okay.
Dr. Ahmad, to answer this question.
So, okay, Tan, I think your question is very high level. Okay, maybe you may want to see me after this, but after COVID has ended, like, okay, you're from Taylor's University. Please send my regard to your dean. Okay, it's a very good question. Because why? Because if you look at the tension between United States of America and China, we can't avoid these two giants. We can't avoid. So depends on who you are. Malaysia is small, so we have to act like a small guy. If you are a small guy but you want to act like Mike Tyson, you will die. You get killed. That's why the Malaysian way is sometimes, you see, sometimes we call it quiet diplomacy. We don't want to, hurt people's feelings. Although the locals say that the government is weak, but there's no choice. Okay, that's why Malaysia now we have to embrace both countries. We cannot say, okay, we want to anti-China, we want to be anti-China, we are pro-United States. We can't. We have to be partners with both countries. Okay, Indonesia after this, okay, for Malaysia, that is the position of Malaysia. Number one. Number two, you ask the economists. They have already done the calculation. They have done the calculation. Okay, when United States and China they collided, okay, on the international economic scene, especially during the Trump administration, and in fact it's still going on, okay, because of the imposition of tariffs and things like that. Okay, the economists have done a study in Malaysia. Malaysian economists have done a study. Which country that Malaysia will gain more? Okay, please make a wild guess. Between China and United States, which country Malaysia gain more? China. So sometimes, even at the ASEAN level, some countries, including Indonesia, they see Malaysia to be like, not to say darling of China, but very close to China. Why? Because Malaysia, we are already open. Our economy is already open. If you go to Kuala Lumpur, you can see Vietnamese restaurant, you can see Indonesian restaurant, you can see, even after this, we will see Argentinian restaurant. And the liberalization is what you call, is widespread. Okay, it's not only in Kuala Lumpur. You go to Johor Bahru, you go to Penang, you go to, now in fact the liberalization has crept into Sabah and Sarawak, in the east coast of Peninsular Malaysia. Okay, so we have already suffered from what we call as the middle income trap. In 1980s, okay, when Tun Mahathir became prime minister, second he became, I don't know after this. Okay, all right, his first prime ministership, when he introduced Malaysian incorporation, he introduced privatization, he introduced, okay, the Pandang ke Timur. Okay, what is Pandang ke Timur in English? Look East policy. Look East policy means look to Japan. Why? At that time, Tun Mahathir want to break away from the British. Malaysia, we broke away from our colonial power about 30 years after our independence. Indonesia broke away immediately after you got independence. Now we are no longer be like seen as, very close to United Kingdom. But now we have to make a choice whether we want to continue to be very close to China or we also want to be close to United States. But don't forget ASEAN. Unfortunately, I don't want to make remarks about ASEAN, okay, because some people may feel hurt about it. But ASEAN is things that you have to also understand. How does it work? Okay, in the end, for Malaysia, okay, we have to look at where do we gain more. Okay, that's why some people say it's not bad to have an FTA with United States. Okay, for Malaysia. For Indonesia, it's very interesting. Indonesia is at the process of growing. The economy is growing now. Okay, so when you talk about China and United States, okay, both countries, okay, have different characteristics in terms of the economy. Technology, okay, you have you cannot, we cannot, okay, we cannot, what should I say? I have to be a bit diplomatic. We cannot deny the fact that United States is number one in the economy, so in terms of technology, particularly technology relating to, for example, supercomputers, technology, IT, okay, those technology which are very important now, which are being used as the basis for technologies in other sectors or other types of technologies. Okay, the vaccine, for example, why Pfizer is different from Sinovac. Pfizer use, very, very latest technology, okay, that modify the DNA, the RNA. Sinovac use old technology. So in the end, if Indonesia wants to get benefit from the technology, you have to look to the United States or to some countries in Europe, like Germany. But it will come with a price. What price? Intellectual property. Okay. And again, we have already experienced that. Okay. Like what happened to our proton. Okay, you know what happened to our proton? Our Indonesian friends. We cannot get the technology from the Japanese. Okay, especially in the most important parts, which is the engine. And in the end, we have to, I'm not saying sell it off, no, but then, that particular industry is not, it's not working. That doesn't work. Okay, so I think when it comes to the last part of the question, the legalistic position and Malaysia administrative both have pros and cons. The administrative position, okay, the administrative approach to economy, okay, is efficient. What do you mean by efficient? We can work very fast. Why? Because you don't need to go to parliament. We have problem because parliament in Malaysia does not sit. Okay, but the government still work because we use the administrative system. Sorry, the administrative approach. So the civil servants still work day and night. But it doesn't work in Indonesia. Indonesia, you have to go to parliament. You have to debate. Right? Then say, can you stop debating and then start working? This is another thing. So that's why, the different, sometimes the differences, sometimes you cannot, it's not easy to change because it's already part of the national system. Thank you. Can you
Okay. Ms. Tan Ejin, do you have any further question or is it clear enough for you?
Yep, it's clear. Thank you, Prof.
Okay.
Okay. The next question comes from Sahira, Taylor's University. Thank you, Professor, for giving a very insightful presentation. I enjoy it. My question is, IMF provides funds that could help developing countries. But what happens if these developing countries are unable to pay back their loan?
Okay, very good question. If they so-called borrow from IMF and they default, okay, first, their currency will be in trouble. When their currency are in trouble, then people may not want to trade with them. Okay, institutionally speaking, if they default, they cannot get further assistance from IMF. So what they have to do? They have to get assistance from other countries. Okay, this happened to Argentina. Okay, but now I'm not sure because of the COVID thing. Okay, I think IMF also has worked very closely with the WHO and also WTO. So they cannot just declare that certain countries have already defaulted. Because you need money to use. Okay, you need to use money for other other important things. For example, for your healthcare. Okay, especially for countries that subsidize the healthcare a lot, like Malaysia. But of course, Malaysia does not borrow from IMF. So you may ask me, when we are in trouble, what do we do? Again, because it's YouTube, I'm afraid I want to explain. And then of course but we do not use IMF. Why we don't use IMF? Because we can get assistance from domestic lenders. Malaysia, that's why if we look at Malaysia's economy, the financial sector is very, very important to our economy. We have our own banks. Number one, we have our own banks. Then we have what we call as the employees provident fund. the EPF. The Employees Provident Fund is actually the fund that pool contribution from all workers in the country. Indonesia, the difference is the fund is under the Ministry of Human Resource, right? The pension is under Human Resource, right? What do you call the pension fund? Is it under the Human Resource Ministry? Because last time, I was in Indonesia, it was placed under the Human Resource Ministry.
I think no, sir.
It's already under the Ministry of Finance, right?
Yeah, Finance, the Ministry of Finance. Yeah.
Okay, last time it was then it was changed. Okay, the EPF is also a lender to the government. We also have what we call as the you heard Tabung Haji?
Yeah.
Tabung Haji. We have because Malaysia after the 1969 riots, the government introduced the new economic policy. So they established institutions that act like a bank. Not bank to lend, but bank to get deposit from the Malays, because the Malays, they don't save, they don't have money. So what they do, they will let's say the idea was like, every month they put in 10 ringgit, 10 ringgit, 10 ringgit, 10 ringgit, 10 ringgit, and then the money is pooled and it became very powerful. Okay, so that was actually the means for to say, let's say if the government have some problem, they will use, and also of course the external sources, but they don't want to use IMF because IMF, they put conditionality. For countries like Indonesia may not have problem, but for Malaysia, we will have problem. Okay, the conditionality will require a lot of policies to be removed in Malaysia, including the Pro Bumi Putra policy. So that's why the government say the time is still not right, but I think the time will come when that policy will be removed. Okay, but it's not because of the outside pressure. It will be from the internal like pressure, or maybe they say that it doesn't work anymore. Because last time, even now, the universities now, they are becoming more and more like open to everyone. Because last time there's a we call a reserve place for the Bumi and the non-Bumi, but now most of the universities now, I think these are the things that are going to be things of the past in Malaysia. So for the IMF, if the countries default, that will happen to the first, currency will be in trouble, and then they cannot get assistance from IMF anymore.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ahmad. How about you, Miss Shahira? Is it clear enough? Is it clear enough or not? Okay, if you don't have any further question, we will continue on another question from Dennis from the National University of Malaysia. Greeting, doctor. I want to ask what overseas investors can do when the government enforce a policy or law which restrict the funds withdrawing out from the countries, especially during COVID-19 pandemic, where economic is unstable. Does national interest override free trade policy? Please, Dr. Ahmad.
Okay. Now you have to look at what type of account. Okay. Here, if it's current account, okay, current account means Indonesian worker working in Indonesia. You're talking. Sorry. If it's current account, we're talking about investor. Okay, I start with current account first. Let's say, Mr. Handi, you work in, you become a lecturer in Malaysia. Okay, you work in a lecturer in Malaysia. Okay, you earn money, put your money in current account. Okay, that money cannot be restricted. Okay, the remission of the money back to your country cannot be restricted. Okay, but there can be restriction on capital. What's the difference? Okay, capital means, okay, normally capital is a large amount of money, okay, that you put in the bank, okay, to fund the operation of a company, for example, or fund operation of a business, for example. Or if you buy a house, this is another example of capital. Okay, a few years ago, many Chinese from Chinese investor, they came to Malaysia and they buy properties in Malaysia. Okay, you have a lot of houses, a lot of residential houses, a lot of real properties bought by by China citizen. okay, by China citizen. So it caused quite, uneasiness among people in Malaysia, among the locals, because they say that, are we going to sell our country to, to China at the time, right? Okay, now for capital, the government can impose some restriction and it's allowed by IMF. So shouldn't be a problem under IMF. My concern is not IMF. My concern is under international investment law. Okay, if Malaysia has a BIT, bilateral investment treaty with, say, China, and the BIT has a provision, has an article that says that you cannot control movement of capital into and out of your country, then we'll be in trouble. Okay, number one. But if it's because of COVID-19, okay, most of FTAs have general exceptions. So you may use the general exceptions, but again, exception sometimes is not easy. Okay, you have to prove, okay, all the conditions cumulatively. What do you mean by cumulatively? If it has 5, you have to prove all 5. Sorry, 5 or 4. You have to prove all the conditions. And sometimes, okay, if let's say the matter is brought to a dispute settlement body, the dispute settlement body will take a very narrow interpretation, a narrow approach. So it's not easy. So I can say that, there are concerns, there are risks. That's why when state, okay, country want to enter into BIT or FTA, they have to be careful.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Dr. Ahmad. How about you, Dennis? Is it clear enough, or you want ask another question? Dennis? Okay, maybe it is a last question. This question from my colleagues too, Mr. Bagus again. What do you think about FDI, foreign direct investment from a foreign country that come to your country? Is it bring much advantage to the country, to your country, or it is only bring advantage for the investor? For Dr. Ahmad, please answer the question. Pardon, Dr. Ahmad, please
Okay.
unmute your...
I don't want you to state what company because I am going to be sued.
Yeah.
But I know that Indonesia is becoming a destination for investment, foreign investment destination. There's a reason for that. Why companies come to your country? Is it because they love your country? No.
Oh.
They don't
Natural
love your
resource.
country. You are okay. Why should they love their country unless they have their wife from here, family from here, or maybe the girlfriend or boyfriend from here? Then, but even then, they love the girlfriend, the person. They don't love the country. Okay, if I can use that as a starting point. Okay, they come because of economic reason. Okay, for natural resources. Okay, your country is very rich with minerals. When you are rich, people want to come to you. Why? Because, and then you look at what type of minerals. Your minerals are very important. Okay, I give you example, bauxite, nickel. These are two important raw materials used to make batteries, electric cars, That's why they come to your country. Okay, when they come to your country, what do they do? What do they do? They will open a factory.
Yeah.
When they open a factory, why they open a factory in your country? First, cheap raw materials, cheap labor, but you have to see what are the spillover effects. Environment, okay? Is environment is going to happen? Is environment is going to be in danger? Number one. Number two, this is very important. The value added. You know value added? What is value added? When they come to your country, okay, they will extract the minerals. This is in terms of mineral. Extract the minerals, process the minerals. Then to what level of value addition that you want to impose on them for them to operate their factory in your country? What are the activities in the plant? Plant means factory. Is it just to process, the raw material, let's say the iron ore to become processed iron? Or is it you impose on them to process from iron into steel? Okay, or from Do you okay? Do you? I mean, is the foreign investor going to, manufacture batteries in your country? Then you say you have already insisted on them to come here not only to extract and then process the raw minerals, but now they have to build what? They have to manufacture batteries. Okay. Then another point comes into the picture: IP, intellectual property. Definitely, okay, who owns the IP? The IP is owned by the foreign investor. So what should you do? Can you force transfer of technology? Don't ask me. You have to ask your government. Then you have to also look at the agreement between. First, you have to look at the BIT, Bilateral Investment Treaty, if there is any, between Indonesia and also the country of the investor. You look FTA if there is any. Okay, but of course, most of the FTA now has provision that protect the interest of the investor, including protection against expropriation. In expropriation, government cannot force the sale of the property belonging to investor, or else becomes expropriation. Okay, now it doesn't prohibit totally. You can expropriate, but you have to provide, you have to give compensation. And the issue of IP, if the IP chapter says that you have to provide full protection to the IP owner, you have to protect the IP. You cannot force them to give the IP. Okay, that's why, if you ask me in terms of the policy, you have to build the capacity of your research institutes. Okay, your universities the capacity has to be built. But again, the challenge will be, we universities, are not, we are like, imagine you want to face a giant, you're just a small guy. Okay, do you think that university can face that giant? No. We universities, we are not meant to be negotiating with this giant to get their technology. So the government has to interfere. The government has to promote sharing of technology, which I think is very important to be done. I don't think they will share the technology. If they share, then finish. So maybe one thing that you may think is the downstream industry, or maybe the upstream industry. Or you may, for example, so many things that I want to explain, because this is your YouTube. But you can, ask me later on, how Malaysia, for example, you need to do something. This is, okay, I want to tell you that, what is happening in your country, we experienced it maybe 20 years ago, when we were at our peak, when we have a lot of money. When at that time, money, and money, because people, invest with a lot of money. But now we don't have money anymore. That's why we have to, and then, this is another thing. When you, in terms of investment of infrastructure, okay, you have to understand, when you want to build airports, you want to build highways, you want to build so many things, at one time, the time to pay the debts will come. You have to make sure that your money does not flow out of the country too much. Okay, that's why sometimes, you have to build the capacity of your own lenders, the lenders of your own country, yang bagi hutang. Malaysia, we are, I don't explain too much, maybe then I'll be in trouble, because this is the economic policy. Some of the economic policy are the economic policy which is made by the government. So the government economic policy must be robust, must be flexible. But again, that's why, at the table that I show you, Indonesia, you have, I know that that's the omnibus law, the one which caused the demonstration last year. Because you have your law that, in Indonesia, foreigners cannot own land.
Yeah.
Until now, right? Because it's against Pancasila. Am I right? It's against Pancasila?
From perspective several laws, legal scholar like that, especially a constitutional law legal scholar.
If it's against your constitutional guiding principle, you cannot change it. Okay, Malaysian constitution, if you look at our constitution, we don't have any guiding principle on the economy, because our constitution is contributed by the British. Okay, so you can do anything you like in Malaysia, but of course the government will try to help through the administrative measure. Like for example, because of COVID, the government will flush money. Flush, we use the word flush. They will flush money to the people. in terms of, subsidy. Okay, the government, I don't want to delve into politics. I'm not a supporter or opponent of the government, but the government has done a good job in flushing the money to the people. Yes, I know some of the SMEs, they are finished, but at least, they can move to another business. They can do online business. They can sell food. They can sell the what we call in Yogyakarta bakpia patok, for example. Bakpia patok, they can sell online, and some of them are now doing very well. This is what I say. Sometimes, there's blessing in disguise, but you have to have the infrastructure first. So when you ask me again about the FDI, that is what I can tell you. I cannot, I mean, we can have a chat after this. Maybe if let's say you have to, let's say among the lecturers in economic law, we can have actually some informal chat. We can exchange ideas, which is less formal. But here I can say that, Indonesia, the what they call the growth is unprecedented. But you have to manage the growth, but don't worry. You have your people, you have your government, they will do the best for your country. Politics, yes, let the politician play politics. We in universities, we focus on how to build our country, build a nation. And one more thing, I think, for Malaysia, Indonesia, we have to start thinking of, the bilateral. How do we do things bilaterally? Because, okay, I can give you an example. Why, okay, why Malaysia, Indonesia, some elements of the economic relations cannot be explained simply just by referring to textbook. We have, people, we have companies, big companies from Malaysia. They also have their, their clans in Indonesia. So the capital move freely. We have people, I also have I can say that, part of myself has Indonesian blood from Sumatra. Okay, so if let's say, I go to Sumatra, then I see that, I can help with, the building of what they call the capacity building. I cannot be a businessman because I'm not a businessman. I will not bring capital to Indonesia, but you can do a kind of joint venture, JV. You have a joint venture in terms of, for example, you have the expertise from other countries like Malaysia, right? Have a joint venture, and you can have, for example, for a shareholding agreement. That is better, but it does. I mean, it's very difficult to work for, multi-billion projects because the government will be involved. And when the government involved, government work, okay, sometimes government have to take into consideration a lot of factors. Factors that, sometimes also, it's hard for us to comprehend.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. Thank you very much on sharing your knowledge. It's useful for us to make understand regarding this topic. Yeah. Before I close this virtual class session, maybe you have a final statement in brief.
My final statement, actually, I have already said just now. We have to think of how do we first benefit from globalization from below. I'm so touched to see that we have, a representative from Taylor's, from UKM. Build your connection, build your network with, students from Diponegoro University. Okay, for the Malaysians, don't think that we are better. Think that, we have to be, both of us have to be better. Malaysians and Indonesians have to be better. Although we are two different countries, we are so proximate. Okay, we can't afford to have one country going this way, other country going that way. It will not work. The best example is palm oil. For the palm oil dispute before the WTO, I will see that this will be a kind of something which is also unprecedented, has never happened before, and decision of WTO will have implication on Indonesia as well. But of course, Indonesia may take a different course. Okay, may take a different what they call course of action. Okay, so in the end, I think international economic law, okay, will continue. Okay, international economic law will develop, but in the end, the states, okay, will be the one which will decide whether international economic law will benefit them or not. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ahmad. I wish our collaboration getting longer and well sustained between Undip, Universitas Diponegoro, and the National University of Malaysia. Okay, you are always
Thank you very much.
welcoming to our faculty.
You
Okay,
again.
okay. Well, all participants, we have reached at the end of our session today. Thank you for your participation. Keep safe and stay healthy during this pandemic situation. I will give back the control of Zoom to our Master of Ceremony, Miss Atisha.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Handi Rizky, and then absolutely Associate Professor Dr. Hanif Ahmad for your comprehensive and insightful material. Well, ladies and gentlemen, now we hold photo sessions with our special speakers and absolutely our moderator. So for all the participants, please turn on your camera. All right. Okay, I think that's enough. Okay, on my side, in 3, 2, 1. Once more. In 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you very much. Finally, we are in the end of this session. It has been a great and wonderful afternoon with all of you. May what we conducted today will be useful for us. As the Master of Ceremony on behalf of committee, would like to apologize if there is any mistake during these sessions. That's all for today. See you on another sessions of summer course Lex Proficia 2021. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Santi Santi Santi, Om Namo Buddhaya. Salam kebajikan untuk kita semua. Stay safe and stay healthy all. Have a good rest. See you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Atisha.
Thank you, Para Handi. Thank you, Dr. Hanif Ahmad.
Thank you.